All right. Now, this last fall, if you follow me at all on Facebook, if we're friends on Facebook, either through my personal page or the ministry, I had come across this video of this lady named Esther Walker. Do any of you know who I'm talking about? There's some nodding heads out there. Yeah, Esther. So Esther is probably in her 80s. She's a retired Bible teacher and a pastor's wife. And her daughter sort of sets her up with these prompts. And then in just about 3 of the most anointed minutes you will ever watch on Facebook, she'll give a lesson. And they are incredible. And, in the thread, and even when I share things, people are like, man, I want to be like Esther. Man, I want to be like Esther. And we all kind of want to, we all have an Esther, right, sort of in our lives that we think, man, I want to be like Esther. But one of the things that I know to be true about Esther is that Esther wasn't born Esther. Esther was formed into being Esther. That Esther's faith, that she took whatever measure of faith it was that she had, and then she pressed into it when she needed it the most. And she grew up to be probably the Esther herself of somebody who went before her who was her Esther. If you haven't seen it, go check it out, Esther Walker on Facebook. Well, in one of the videos that she shared that sort of grabbed me, she had just mentioned this passage in Isaiah 40. And after I had watched the message a few times, I went to Isaiah 40, and this was probably October. And, I'm a Bible teacher, so something I do a lot is read the Bible. It's a good habit to have, right? I, for like 6 weeks, just read Isaiah 40. That's pretty much it. Every day I'd go to my Bible and I'd open it and I'd think, I'm going to go somewhere else today, Lord. And it'd be like, no, we're going to stay in Isaiah 40. So what has been birthed out of that is something that we're doing a little bit differently. We're going to have WOW January, February, March, and April. And what we're going to do through these 4 months is it's going to actually be a series on Isaiah 40. Now, every message is going to sort of stand by itself, but in the end, what we hope to be able to do is package it as a series. We're going to add some resources and things to it so that it could both, each message stand alone, and that we could also have a series that we would also be able to offer through our YouTube and our website and those sorts of things. However, in order to get us to Isaiah 40, which opens with these words, comfort, comfort my people. Who doesn't want to spend 3 weeks in the book of the Bible that opens comfort? Comfort my people. In order to get us to the place where we can really dive deep into Isaiah 40, we got to know what happened in Isaiah 39. We got to know sort of what came before in these chapters 38 and 39. Now, the interesting thing about the book of Isaiah is that it's like a Bible within the Bible. The first 39 chapters of Isaiah are all Isaiah speaking in real time to the people of Israel, specifically to the people of Judah. And it's sort of the law and judgment. He's like, straighten up, get into the law, get into your obedience. If you don't do these things, here's what's going to happen. It's Isaiah sort of in his real time with the people, talking to them. And then when you get to Isaiah 40, there's this great hinge on the door of Isaiah that swings open to reveal a God who comes down. The God who's going to come down and begin to comfort my people. There is not a book in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that has a more complete prophetic picture of who Jesus is. In the book of Isaiah, we have the announcement of his coming, the announcement of his virgin birth, the proclamation that he is of the good news. We have the prophecy of his death, his resurrection, and his return to claim his own. There's not a more complete book in the Old Testament that gives us the prophetic picture of who Jesus is. And that door in Isaiah that swings from the law and the judgment, it swings at Isaiah 40. It's the hinge that happens there. So over the next 3 months, we are going to go into Isaiah 40. But we've got to get started tonight with Isaiah 38 and 39, where we actually have the story of King Hezekiah. Now, Hezekiah's story is also told in 2 Chronicles and in 2 Kings. So I don't want you to get confused. We are talking about a story that's from Isaiah 38 and 39, but I'm going to bounce a little bit between those other 2 narratives because they give some pieces to the story that aren't all told in Isaiah 38 and 39. Hezekiah was the 4th king of Judah who reigned under Isaiah's ministry in Judah. He was a good king. I want to repeat for you over and over tonight. Hezekiah was one of the good guys. Hezekiah was good. Hezekiah's father was not good. Hezekiah took to the throne at age 25, and he led Judah for 29 years. He was constantly aware of the history of God. He was aware of his history. He was aware of his faithfulness. He wanted to restore to the kingdom of Judah a people who worshiped God. And when he took the throne, he tore down all the idols. He threw away and destroyed the idols, even the golden serpent of Moses, which had become a source of idol worship for the people of Israel. His father, when he had reigned, actually closed the temple and nailed the doors shut. So Hezekiah, when he gets to the throne, he opens the temple. He cleans out the temple. He reinstates the Levitical priesthood. He reinstates Passover. He brings revival to his country. He's a good king. It tells us in 2 Chronicles 31:20, Hezekiah did throughout all of Judah what was good and right and faithful before the Lord his God. Now we have to remember that he was the son of a wicked king. But in 2 Kings 18:6-7, it says Hezekiah held fast to the Lord. He did not depart from following him, but kept the commandments that the Lord commanded Moses. And the Lord was with him. Whenever he went out, he prospered. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria and would not serve him. He put God first, and he prospered in everything that he did. But in Hezekiah's life, as we're going to see, he faced 3 battles. 3 battles that you and I are going to be able to identify with. And we're going to talk about those. And at the end of those 3 battles, there's a couple lessons that we're going to walk out of here with tonight from those. The first battle is this. It's the corporate battle. 14 years into his reign, Hezekiah faced a crisis against the Assyrians. Now remember, I just said in that verse before that he went against the king of Assyria. Now Assyria would have been the world dominant power at the time, okay? And his father had paid tribute to Syria, which what that means is this. When they would pay tribute to somebody, every worshiper would have gone to the temple and they would have paid a tribute tax. It was like a worship tax. But since his father had shut the temple, since his father had shut down worship, the Assyrians who did not worship God and who were a dominant power said, I want your tax. Worship us. And so they required that the people of Judah and that this country would pay this tribute tax to them. So they were beholden to the Assyrians under his father's reign. And when Hezekiah came to the throne, he said, there's going to be no more false worship of Assyria. We will not capitulate to you. We will not pay you a tribute tax. We will not do your bidding. We will not do what you say. And you can imagine how Assyria took this. So the Assyrians, 14 years into his reign, are ready to come in and they want to take this kingdom. They had already conquered the northern part of Israel. They had conquered surrounding countries, and they were ready at this point to take on Judah. And the king of Assyria had sent a letter to Hezekiah saying, we're on our way and there's not a thing that your God can do about it. In 2 Kings 19:19, Hezekiah received the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up to the house of the Lord and spread it out before God. Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see, and hear the words of the king of Assyria, which he has sent to mock the living God. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations and their lands and have cast their gods into fire, for those were not gods, but the work of man's hand and stone. They were destroyed. Now, Lord our God, deliver us from his hand so that all the kingdoms of the earth will know that you and you alone are God. He got a letter, and the first thing he did was put it on the altar and spread it out before God. Lord, this king is coming in here, and he's mocking you. He thinks because he can take the man-made idols of these other countries and destroy them, that he can come in here and destroy you. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? At the same time that he had gone to the altar to pray, he had also sent for for Isaiah. And Isaiah's response from the Lord comes in 2 Kings 19, verse 32. Therefore says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into this city or shoot an arrow there, or come before it with a shield or cast up a siege mound against it. And this is my favorite part. By the way that he came, the same way he shall return. And he shall not come into this city, declares the Lord, for I will defend the city to save it for my own sake. And hear this, for the sake of my servant David. That night the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, there were all dead bodies. Well, I would guess so. There are attacks that aren't personal. There are attacks that we deal with that are corporate attacks. There are attacks that come against not just our family, but the family. There are attacks that come against our businesses. There are attacks that come against our schools. There are attacks that come against our communities. There are attacks that are corporate attacks. But God's looking for the Hezekiahs who will take the letters that have come against those places and put them on the altar and say, will you be mocked? And there hasn't been a time when our God has been mocked as openly as he is mocked now. And we've got to decide what our response is. But let me tell you this in Ephesians 6:12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. We got to get mad at the right guy. We do not win a corporate battle when we go into hand-to-hand combat with the people around us. We can't even as a church get into unity concerning the things in our culture. We've got to get into unity with one another and understand that unity does not mean uniformity, but unity means that we have a common enemy. We get these corporate letters together. 2 Chronicles 32:22 says, the Lord saved Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem, and he took care of them on every side. Do you know that when you're receiving the corporate letter on behalf of somebody, it's because you've been put in the place of influence over that thing? You've been put in that place to receive that letter and to bring the other people alongside of you to battle the right enemy. We battle against flesh and blood. Whatever area you lead, you have influence, and your prayer matters. Will you go to the altar as quickly as Hezekiah went to the altar? We don't fight the battle with a snarky tweet. We don't fight the battle fighting in a Facebook thread. It's not where the battle's going to get won. We fight the battle at the altar. The second battle was his personal battle. Hezekiah came down with a life-threatening sickness. In 2 Kings 20, verse 1, in those days, Hezekiah became sick and was at the point of death. And Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, came and said to him, thus says the Lord, set your house in order, for you shall die. You shall not recover. Then Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord, saying, now, O Lord, please remember how I have walked before you in faithfulness and with a whole heart and have done what is good in your sight. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. In those days, this was actually happening in the same days as the threat from the Assyrians. I mean, you know, when it rains, it pours, right? When it rains, it pours. Now, I would hope that if a prophet came to me and said, the Lord said this sickness is unto your death, that I would ask the Lord, maybe not. You know? But I kind of think before studying this that if somebody had come to me and said this sickness is unto your death, I'd have started preparing my family for my death. You know what I mean? I don't actually know what to do with what's getting ready to happen. Because in verse 4, before Isaiah had gone out of the middle court, in other words, before Isaiah had even left Hezekiah's house, the word of the Lord came to him, turn back and say to Hezekiah, the leader of my people, thus says the Lord, and hear this again, the God of your father David, I have heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. Behold, I will heal you. On the third day, you shall go up to the house of the Lord, and I will add 15 years to your life. And Isaiah said, bring a cake of figs and let them take it and lay it on the boil that he may recover. I just think that's super interesting, right? Isn't everybody like, the Lord knows the Lord knows the number of your days and all that? I'm like, now I know. If anybody comes to me and says this sickness is unto death, I'm going to weep bitterly and ask the Lord to extend my life. What we're beginning to see here is that prayer really does change things. It's not just a catchy saying. That his first response is to go to the altar. But I also want you to see this. Twice now, we have seen that the Lord's response to Hezekiah included this phrase, the God of your father, David. Hezekiah was a great-grandson times 6 times of King David. I want you to hear this in Psalms. This is a word that the Lord gave to David. Psalms 89, beginning in verse 28. My steadfast love I will keep for him forever, and my covenant will stand firm for him. I will establish his offspring forever, and his throne as the days of the heavens. If his children forsake my law and do not walk according to my rules, if they violate my statutes and do not keep my commandments, I will punish their transgressions with the rod and their iniquity with stripes, but I will not remove my steadfast love or be false to my faithfulness. Translation, I won't treat your kids the way I treat other kids. Because of your faithfulness, David, because of what you've stored up with me, because of the mercy and grace that you have stored up with me, and let's all remember that King David wasn't perfect either. But what he stored up for him impacted his family and his generations down 6 generations. Have we understood, or have we underestimated the power and influence our faithfulness or lack thereof could have on the generations coming behind us? Could it be in that moment that the Lord's heartstrings were plucked for David and Hezekiah's life was extended? I don't know. I'm going to pray and weep bitterly and also remind him about my grandma. That's what I'm going to do if it comes, okay? But I'm saying that we have a God who longs to look on us with loving kindness. And will we go to the altar quickly? Will we go to the altar quickly? Picking back up in verse 8, and we're in 2 Kings 20. And Hezekiah said to Isaiah, what shall be the sign that the Lord will heal me? And that I shall go up to the house of the Lord on the 3rd day. And Isaiah said, this shall be the sign to you from the Lord, that the Lord will do that thing that he promised. And you'll see a shadow go forward 10 steps. I want you to see that. He's going to do the thing he promised. He said he was going to heal you and extend your life. But not only that, Hezekiah, you're going to see the shadow go forward 10 steps or go back 10 steps. And Hezekiah was like, oh, it's easy for the shadow to go forward 10 steps. I really want to know his word. Can you have him take it back 10 steps? I was sort of ad-libbing that for you, but that's what we have there. And Isaiah, the prophet, called to the Lord, and he brought the shadow back 10 steps by the way it had gone down the steps. Now, again, God gave his word to Hezekiah. I'm going to remind you, Hezekiah is the good king, okay? He's a good guy. God gave his word before Isaiah had left his house. I'm going to extend your life 15 years. And I want you to see this because we've got to dig deep and we've got to begin to pick up on these clues. Hezekiah said, that's great. How do I know he's telling me the truth? What is going to be the sign that he's going to do this thing that you tell me he's going to do? In other words, he's like, I like this word, but how do I know? I believe you, God, sorta. Can you give me another sign? I'll take the shadow 10 steps. That's easy, God. Will you take it back 10 steps? Do you see what's beginning to enter into Hezekiah's story? I believe you, sorta. And what we're also beginning to see is that Hezekiah was bold in the corporate battle and he wavered in the personal. How many times do we believe the things out there more than we believe the things that are in here? When we move now into this 3rd battle of his story, we have to mark these places where Hezekiah is beginning to waver in what he believes from the word of the Lord. The 3rd battle is the pride battle. Isaiah 39, picking up in verse 1. At that time, the son of Baladan, the king of Babylon, sent envoys with letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he heard that he had been sick and recovered. And Hezekiah welcomed them gladly, and he showed them the treasure of his house, the silver, the gold, the spices, the precious oil, the whole armory, all that was found in his storehouses. There was nothing, say nothing, there was nothing in his house or in all his realm that Hezekiah did not show them. The Babylonians were a much bigger empire. They didn't go there because they were impressed with Hezekiah or Judah. They didn't go there because they thought that they were going to be able to get a wealth that was greater than their wealth. This was a reconnaissance mission, right? And Hezekiah was more than happy to peacock through his kingdom and show them everything that he would have to offer to them. I want you to hear this piece out of one commentary that I read from Ray Ortlund. It says, the book of Revelation portrays the evil arrayed against us in two forms: the great beast to intimidate us and the great whore to seduce us. In some parts of the world today, persecution is the dominant strategy of the devil, but in our part of the world, seduction has been his usual method. But Satan doesn't care one way or the other as long as he wins. He may savage us or he may flatter us. In the case of Hezekiah, he sought to do both of those things. When Judah was surrounded by the mocking Assyrians, his sense of God made him brave, right? He was fighting a corporate battle. It wasn't just personal. It didn't have to just do with him. But when the Babylonians appear with all their congregations, flattery and smiles, Hezekiah melts under the flattery of the Babylonians. James 4:4, you adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. I've actually said before that anything that is wildly popular in culture, a Christian should give serious pause to. Should give serious pause and wisdom to anything that is wildly popular in culture. Not every person or show or music is designed to persecute you, but do not be misled. It is designed to seduce you. Verse 3 in Isaiah 39, then Isaiah the prophet came to King Hezekiah and said to him, what did these men say? And from where did they come to you? Hezekiah said, they have come to me from a far country, from Babylon. So you can just see how flattered he is when you begin to read this. They came a long way to see me. You know, how far they traveled to see me is equal to how awesome they now think I am. See, in this moment, Hezekiah thinks that he's going to be able to be a big player on the international political stage. He thinks that he's getting a seat at the table that he's always wanted. Have you ever wanted a seat at the table? Be careful what table you long to sit at. In this moment, he's impressing the big guys. He is willing to be in the big leagues even if God's not there. Even if God is not there. When we start to be flattered by the same ones that we've been sent to influence, we've lost our spiritual mooring. When we start to be flattered by the attention of the same ones we've been sent to influence, we have lost our spiritual footing. His self-importance is beginning to cloud his sense of God's importance. Listen, Babylon never wanted to be his friend. Babylon wanted his stuff, even though it was small compared to what they had. Now, Babylon, in case you don't know, in the Bible is a picture of everything that's wrong with the world. Babylon is the picture of lust and greed and self and gluttony and just everything that would go counterintuitive to what God would have us long for. Picking back up in verse 3, and again, we're back in Isaiah. He said, Isaiah, what have they seen in your house? And Hezekiah answered, they have seen all that is in my house. There is nothing in my storehouses that I did not show them. Hezekiah invited in the enemy and then gave him all his passwords. Like, that's basically what has happened. When we invite the enemy in through the flattery we so desperately think we need, we've shown the enemy all our cards. We've shown him what we truly think is important, the attention that we truly want to worship. In verse 5, then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house. Remember, there was nothing he did not show them. So in all the nothing that you did not show him, remember this. All that's in your house and all which your fathers have stored up to this day shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, says the Lord. And some of your own sons who will come from you, whom you will father, shall be taken away. And they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then Hezekiah said to Isaiah, the word of the Lord that you have spoken is good, for he thought there will be peace and security in my day. The Lord has just told him that his sons and that his people and all that he sees and has loved and has ever fought for, the same people who the Assyrians came to annihilate and destroy, that he went to the altar for to pray for their deliverance, those same people, he's saying they're all going to be taking. This is the beginning. He is telling him and prophesying to him the 70 years of captivity in Babylon. And Hezekiah's response is, I was worried there for a second, Isaiah. I thought you meant it was going to happen while I was alive. When he says this word of the Lord that you have given me is good, in the Hebrew text it's emphatic, and it would read, good is this word. Good is this word. Because it's not going to happen to me. You had me worried there, but I'm going to live out my days just fine. In the same way that we can store up that mercy and that grace for those come behind us, we can also set them up for captivity when we are unwilling to deal with the sin in our lives, but we push it off to them to be able to deal with when they rise up and have to confront it. When we aren't strong enough to deal with the thing that's coming against us, sometimes we have to turn around and look at the people who are coming behind us and say, I may not be able to do it for me, but I'll do it for you. When my mom passed away, it's been 5 years ago now. And listen, I honor my mom. I love my mom, clearly and without question. But I also knew that when my mom died, that there were some things that were going to have to die with her. And it wasn't disrespect to my mom, because I'm telling you, the second she opened her eyes in heaven, there was not one bit of that she didn't want to die with her. Sometimes we've got to have the courage to deal with the stuff in our lives so that we set the generation behind us coming up at a new place to go further. Because it doesn't die with us unless we say it dies with us. It goes on. Now Hezekiah is teaching us some lessons here, and I'm going to give you 2 tonight. Lesson 1 is this: yesterday's obedience is not enough to cover today's pride. Yesterday's obedience is not enough to cover our rebellion and our pride in today. Let me remind you, Hezekiah was the good king. Hezekiah was the good guy. He did many things to bring the rightful worship of God back into his kingdom. But despite it all, towards the end of his life, we find him exchanging his passion for God for the comfort of his wealth. He's making an exchange. He's so proud of his service to God and all that he's accomplished despite the coming captivity of his people. Remember his prayer. Now, O Lord, please remember how I've walked before you in faithfulness and with a whole heart and have done what is good in your sight. Where'd that guy go? Where'd that King Hezekiah go? Who wanted to continue his obedience on a daily basis. And now we have in this ending chapter of Isaiah, the passion that he once held for the face of God has given way to his own comfort. No matter what battles we've gone through, no matter all the ways that we get forged in the fire of our own trials and our own faith, we never give up. We never give up. We may have a season of rest, but then we've got to be willing to go back into the fight. I mean, I've said this too, and I'm sorry if you've heard me say it and you're like, come up with something new, Pastor Amy. But the Christian life is marked by series and seasons of battle, followed by a season of restoration to get you ready for another season of battle. We don't ever graduate or arrive as Christians to a place where we've learned it all, we've done it all, we've overcome it all, and now it's just for us to enjoy in the latter years of our life. No. If we want to be an Esther, then we keep forging. We keep allowing it to be formed in us. The one battle that we won wasn't the one battle you're going to fight. But to be an overcomer, you've got to get in the process of overcoming. And you've also got to overcome over and over and over again. But every time you do it, you're raised to a new level. Every time you do it, there's more that's been formed. Every time you do it, you're more equipped. You're wiser. You're smarter. You're recognizing things faster. You will learn as you continue to mature and go. The lesson that took you 2 weeks and 10 days and 5 minutes takes you 2 seconds now. It develops and forms and grows in us. When we see that Hezekiah is delivered from his enemies and healed in chapter 38, we see that in chapter 39, he's just dazzled by himself and all his stuff and all the attention that he's getting. And can I remind you that there is nothing new under the sun, and Satan wants you to think that you are what you possess and that you are what other people think of you. And it's a lie that started in the pit of hell. It's the lie that continues today, and it'll never be the truth. Hezekiah was the good king who brought revival back to Judah. And he ended up more concerned about what he had and his reputation with Babylon than his reputation before God. When I was studying this, he was getting on my last nerve. I was agitated. I was confused. And you can ask my board. I texted him. I'm like, have I gone in a rabbit hole? Like, what have I done? Because I couldn't get my thoughts straight. And I woke up in the middle of the night with this thought. The reason he's bugging you is because you're just like him. I'm on my face in praise to God one day over all that he's done and peacocking through my palace the next. Do you know how you have that one kid that's just a little harder because they're just like you? Felt like Hezekiah was like, I felt like it was a people issue. Kings, they're just like us, I figured out that he bugged me because I could see myself in him. I could see my own wavering. I could see where I believed strong in a season only to give up in wavering in the next season. What do we do with that? Is anybody like me? Don't leave me hanging up here. What do we do? I think the first thing we do is that we acknowledge that in the middle of all of life, all of the stuff that we think are big deals, all of the things that we worry about and we stress about and we struggle about and we strive towards and we wrestle with, that at the end of everything, there's one truth. Only God remains. Will we remember that everything else is going to fade? Everything else has an expiration date. This battle that you're in will not last forever. God does. That thing that's tugging on you, it's not going to last forever, but God does. Second, if we're a believer, we also remember that our sanctification is incomplete. Hebrews, you're becoming who you already are. That every single day that we have to get up and say, Jesus, I need what you have today. I can't live today based on what you did just yesterday. I can build on it, but it can't sustain me all the way through. See, the world is distracting. Satan is condemning. Your familiar sins are tempting. All of those things that are going through there, and it's just that we waver because we're human. There's no shame and condemnation in the waver. It's how do we respond? It serves us well to remember this. And after, don't get shame on this, but it serves us well to remember this. We're worse than we think. It's not shame, but when we do have a true revelation that we are worse than we think and God is greater than we could ever imagine, we get ourselves to the position of grace that allows us to waver without failure. The third thing that we can do is be really realistic about this as well. Jesus loves empty, wavering, ungrateful, confused sinners. That even in your wavering, Jesus came down for you. That Jesus came down for that. That he really does leave the 99 and go for the one. Jeremiah 3:12, return, faithless Israel, declares the Lord. I will not look on you in anger, for I am merciful, declares the Lord. Here's what I've learned from Esther on Facebook. Put your name in there. Return, faithless Amy, declares the Lord. I will not look on you in anger, for I am merciful, declares the Lord. Return, faithless, your name. He will not look on you in anger. He is merciful for you. When Satan is discouraging you, when your sins hold you back, when your shame tells you to hide, when your own inner voice is shouting, this time I've gone too far. Anybody? This time is the time that I've really done it. God says, return to me because I am merciful. The same God we offend is the same God who says, come here. Lesson 2, and Christy, you guys can come anytime. Lesson 2 is this. Quickly return to your base. And I'll explain this in a minute. We already know that the trust that Hezekiah had for God was the hallmark of his life, but we also know that at really critical moments he was seduced by pride. 2 Chronicles 32 and verse 24 says, in those days Hezekiah became sick and was at the point of death, and he prayed to the Lord, and he answered him and gave him a sign. But Hezekiah did not make a return according to the benefit done to him, for his heart was proud. Another version says his heart was lifted up. In other words, Hezekiah was lifting himself up. Look how great my faithfulness has been to God. I have been healed by God because of my faithful past. Super thin ice. To go to God in prayer and think that he's going to answer it because we've been awesome. A few weeks ago, I was at one of my daughter's volleyball workout. She plays club volleyball, and then a couple times a month she has a private workout with some other girls from the city. And I was sitting there kind of, you know how you do when they're practicing, you're half listening, half paying attention, half watching, that sort of thing. But real sharply, through my own inattention, I heard the coach say to the girls, never go complacently to your base. Never move complacently to your base. Now, in volleyball, your base is your territory on the court. I don't know if you guys are like me and played volleyball in the 80s. It's not the same. Totally different game. It's taken me about 4 years to understand what's happening and why they're moving everywhere. But in volleyball, your base is not necessarily where you are in rotation, but it's the minute the ball is served and you get to your base, you get to your territory, and that is your territory. And in that territory, that ball does not drop. That ball does not hit the ground. But if you have to move a little bit out of your territory in order to make the play, you better quickly get back to base because another ball is coming. What is base for the Christian? It's the altar. Do we as quickly return to the altar in praise that we went there in prayer? As quickly as we put the letter on the altar in prayer, do we as quickly return to give him praise? See, this is where Hezekiah missed it. He went quickly to the altar when the Assyrians were coming. He went quickly to the altar of prayer when he was sick unto death, but he did not quickly return in praise. And the good King of Judah, who brought revival to his country, who opened the temple doors, who reinstated the Passover, who brought people back before the Lord his God, because he didn't return in praise, his people went into 70 years of captivity. Do we return to the altar as quickly in praise? day in and day out, every one of us here, we're having struggle and we're having victory. We're having breakthrough and we're having deliverance. We're having peace in the midst of chaos. We're getting wisdom in the middle of confusion. We're getting healings in the middle of sickness. We're getting strength in the midst of our weakness. And every time those things happen, are we returning to base? Are we quick to get to base? Are we quick to get back to the altar in praise? I want my life and I want your life to be marked as a life of obedience, a life that brings revival to your home, a life that brings revival to your community, a life that restores the rightful worship of God in every place you put your foot, in your area of influence. And every time you have a struggle, whether it is corporate or whether it is personal, you go to that altar and you pray. But when you get your answer, even in word, you return in praise. That is how the legacy moves on. That is how it will continue. And that way, when we are not here, there isn't the need for somebody to come to our kids in the opening of Isaiah 40 and say, comfort these kids. Our kids will not be left in captivity. Our kids will be left in freedom. If you'll stand to your feet. We're going to move then, now very specifically in a time where no matter what you came in here with, the longing that we talked about earlier, the need that we talked about earlier, we are going to end this night at the altar of praise. There is something tonight for you to put on the altar of praise. You're here. You've got breath in your lungs. Your God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. There is something tonight for you to put on the altar of praise. And if there is something that the Lord is prompting you and reminding you, you didn't return to me with that, come to the altar. Come here in praise. Nora, come on. She's not even waiting. Come to the altar in praise. Your breakthrough tonight, I believe this, is going to be found at the altar of praise. You're free to come here. We're going to have team members here. We're going to have team members in the back. We are here to pray with you. We are here to agree with you. But we're closing this night out on the altar of praise.